I'm ready to start. My topic is on privatizing everything. My motto is, if it moves, privatize it. If it doesn't move, privatize it. And since everything either moves or doesn't move, privatize everything. Why would I want to privatize everything? Because if we want to have a market, we have to have private property. And if it's not privatized, either the government runs it or we have the tragedy of the commons, which I will talk about a little later on. The case for the market vis-a-vis government is, in the market, it acts between consenting adults. So on an ethical basis, we should prefer the market. And on an economic basis, we should also prefer the market because the market is more efficient. Let me give you an example of that. Later on, I'll talk about ocean privatization. And the key here is that on the oceans, you have the surface of the planet is 75% oceans and only accounts for 1% of the GDP, whereas the land is 99%, or rather 75%, and accounts for 25%. Did I get that right? The oceans have 75% of the surface. Land is only 25%, and yet the oceans only account for 1% of the GDP, and land 99%. It's a similar situation with the USSR farms, collectivized farms. There, the private farms had 3% of the land, and the collective farms had 97%, whereas the 97% only counted for 25% of the crops, whereas the 3% accounted for 25% of the crops. So you can sort of see that the market is more efficient. Also, when you have an election, a vote, every 4 years you have a vote, and in the market it's pretty much every day. So we have much more control over the people in charge in the market as consumers than we do as voters in the polity. The focus is very narrow in the market, and that's good. You can vote for a motorcycle or a violin or a red rubber ball or something. Whereas in the political scheme, you can only vote for, Tweedledum and Tweedledummer. And if you like the Republicans, say, on policies 1, 3, 5, and 7, and the Democrats on 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10, you have no way of distinguishing. It's a package deal. You have to take the whole package. So that's very inefficient. Also, there's rational ignorance in the market. The low information voter gets as much vote as the high information voter. And you have no incentive to really learn about these things, so you don't make a wise decision. Whereas in the market, if you want to buy a motorcycle, you'll read Consumer Reports or ask your friends about their motorbike or whatever. So there's much more intelligence going on. Now, what I'm going to do is privatization of roads, streets, and highways. First, second, oceans, rivers, lakes, and third, space. Why am I picking such difficult cases? Because if we can make the case for privatization in the hard cases, then it's easier to make them in the easy cases. Where if we just say we should privatize the post office or parks or sanitation collection, these are easier cases, and I think it's important that we do that too, but I like to stretch a little and go for the hard cases. Okay, the first one is roads. Why should we privatize highways? My main motivation for privatizing highways is that about 35,000 people a year die on the highways every year. To put this in perspective, how many people died in the tragedy of 9/11? Only about 3,000. How many people died in the aftermath of Katrina? Only about 1,900. Now, I don't say that this is unimportant. 3,000 people is 3,000 innocent people too many killed, and the same with 1,900. But these are one-shot deals, and relatively small numbers of people were killed. Whereas on the roads, every year, some 35,000 people die, and that's a tragedy. Surely, if we already had private roads and there were such fatalities, Obama would be holding hearings about greed and profit and this and that and the other, and why are the roads such death traps? But since the government does it, nobody says boo about it. And also, people die in dribs and drabs, only 2 or 3 people here, 5 or 6 people there. Whereas if you get an airline falling, it's 300 people. On the other hand, when black people are killed by cops, it's only 1 or 2 at a time, and everyone is outraged. Why aren't we outraged about this? Well, I'm outraged about it. And I wrote a book, I think it's came out in 2009. I forget when, trying to make the case for privatizing roads, and what I'm going to do is summarize this a little bit. My second motivation for this book is traffic congestion. It's very frustrating, not so bad here, although I was once here during the Katrina semester, and when they have the football games, traffic is amazing around here, and you're much better walking than riding in a car because you can walk faster than the cars go. But in large cities, the traffic congestion is just horrible, and that's a second reason for privatizing roads, because if we had privatizing roads, we'd have peak load pricing, and the idea behind peak load pricing is if this is the traffic during the day, and let's say this is time over here, and this is quantity of traffic. And here we have 9 a.m., noon, 6 p.m. Well, you have traffic congestion sort of like that, the morning rush hour and the evening rush hour. And if you charge more for the use of the roads, what you'll do is reduce it here and maybe increase it here and sort of level it out more. And that's what they do in all sorts of places, whether it's a movie theater or a play or a dinner versus lunch or a ski lodge or a summer activity. When the thing is more popular, you charge more, and that reduces the oscillations. Whereas what the government does is it gives monthly tickets for a bridge or something, and per trip, the per trip price is a little lower if you buy a monthly pass. And if you buy a monthly pass, when are you likely to use the highways? During these peak loads. So what the government does is it exacerbates the peak. And then they tell us to carpool, and they use HOV lanes and use a public bus and all that. These things would naturally occur if the prices were rising. So that would be one reason for privatizing, to get rid of the traffic congestion, which also is serious because people get into road rage when they can't move their car, and you get fights, and there might be some deaths there. Okay, how would it work? How would a private highway run? Well, people would just set up a highway. You want to go from here to there, you clear a path, and you set up a highway, and maybe have toll booths in the old days, and nowadays we have electronic universal product codes. You could put them on the bottom of a car, and as the car goes by, you monitor where the car went, and at the end of the month you get a bill, or you pay a certain fee, and then you get reduced how much money you allocated for this purpose. The first private highways were in England in the 9th century. In this country, during the Revolutionary War times, there were private highways, but the government refused to uphold the law against people using the highways for free by not paying the toll, and it was hard to run the highway when the government wouldn't support it. Okay, now I'm going to do a few objections to this thesis, modest proposal, that we should privatize all highways, streets, roads, avenues, sidewalks, what have you. One objection is that the deaths are not due to government ownership, rather they're due to driving while intoxicated, speed, vehicle malfunction, driver error, texting, all sorts of things like that. Sam Peltzman, a University of Chicago economist, listed 25 reasons why there are these fatalities. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration lists 125 different reasons. And my claim is that this is all nonsense. The real reason for the deaths is not these things. These are just proximate causes. The ultimate cause is the management. Look, suppose we were in a restaurant last night, right? What was the restaurant? Fates. Okay. Suppose that restaurant goes broke. And now we're MBAs, and we're trying to figure out why did the restaurant go broke. And we start listing things, and we say, well, the service was lousy, the place was dirty, the location was bad, location. The cook didn't cook the chicken well, and we start making lists like that. Would that be the real reason? No, the real reason is that the management, the owner, the manager, the entrepreneur didn't pick a good location, didn't hire someone with a broom, didn't hire a better chef. So the ultimate cause is the manager. And who is the manager of the roads? Well, the government. Look, suppose I take a rifle and I shoot right through that wall and I kill the next person who walks past Magnolia Street. I hope the New York Times isn't listening. I'm not really going to do that. I'm not against these people. This is just a hypothetical. And I shoot him and I kill him, and now you all grab me. I'm a murderer. And I say, tut, 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 not so fast. It was the bullet that killed him. I didn't do it. I mean, we wouldn't accept that as an excuse because, yes, the bullet was the proximate cause, but I'm the ultimate cause. So it's the government that is guilty for doing these things. Here's how it might be safer. You see, right now, there's one rule of the road that emanates from Washington, D.C., and in most highways, it's a minimum of 40 and a maximum of 70. And a lot of people do 75, and they won't give you a ticket, which is another whole problem about, breaking the law and disrespect for law. I mean, if the speed limit is 70 and they let you do 75, or arbitrarily they stop you at 72, you never know what's going on. So that's a problem. But maybe the real cause of deaths is not so much speed, but the variation in speed. Maybe the fact that some people do 55 and other people do 75, the standard deviation or the variance in speed is 20 miles an hour and maybe 30 miles an hour in some cases. Maybe what we should do is have the right lane, everyone has to do 50, and the middle lane, everyone has to do 65, and the left lane, everyone has to do 80. Would that be better? Nobody knows. I don't know if it would be. All I know is that competition brings about a better product. The reason we have pretty good shirts and shoes and wristwatches is we have competition. People are free to try different things, and if it works, other people emulate them. And if it doesn't work, they either have to stop or they go bankrupt and then they have to stop. But we don't have that with roads. What we have with roads is one size fits all, and you can't experiment. There are not even 50 different ways for each of the 50 states to do it. The central government will not allow competition in this way, will not allow experimentation. And if you can't allow experimentation, how can you improve? Maybe the deal should be that if you drive 70 in the left-hand lane, that's a very, very bad thing, and they should give you a ticket. Why? Because everyone wants to do 75, or the faster riders want to do 75, and if somebody is sitting in the left lane doing 68, they have to go around, and maybe lane changing is what really causes deaths, not speed. Again, we don't know. I'm not an expert in road safety. I'm hopefully an expert in economics, and economics says that competition will bring about a better product. And I'm just experimenting in my mind's eye with different ways of running roads, and maybe some of them would be better than what we have now. And if so, then we would reduce deaths. Okay, another criticism of my book, or of my article on this, several articles on this, was, government really isn't responsible for all the deaths, because what I do is I estimate, well, how many deaths might there be if we had privatization? And the way I did that, I extrapolated from the fact that there are areas where the government and the private compete or both do the thing, and the government does it at a much higher cost. For example, sanitation, it costs 3 or 4 times as much to move a ton of garbage in the government sector as in the private sector, similarly in the post office. So what I did is I said, I picked the 5-to-1 ratio, and I said that instead of having 35,000 deaths, we'd have 1/5 of that, or 7,000 deaths, right? And Therefore, my critics said, this is Larry White, a famous economist of the Austrian school, said, well, therefore, the government really isn't responsible for 35,000 deaths. It's only responsible for 28,000 deaths because even in the market, there'd be 7,000 deaths. And my argument is no. The government is responsible for all the deaths, even though if we privatize it, we'd still have some deaths. I mean, riding around at 70 miles an hour, you're going to have some nincompoop hitting some other nincompoop, and there'll be some deaths. I'm not saying that we have nirvana, that we have perfection in private enterprise. It's just a vast reduction. And the analogy I use is, let's stipulate that Hitler killed 6 million Jews. But he took them 4 years to do it, or 5 years to do it. And during that time, say 100,000 Jews would have died of natural causes. I'm just making these numbers up for illustrative purposes. So is Hitler responsible for 6 million deaths or 5.9 million deaths? Well, I say 6 million. He killed 6 million, even though 100,000 would have died in the 4-year interim. He's still responsible for the whole kit and caboodle, and therefore I say that the government is still responsible for the whole kit and caboodle, even though under private enterprise there would have been fewer deaths. Other things that I talk about in terms of safety is every time there's a death, maybe there should be a cross or a Jewish star or a Muslim emblem or whatever their emblem is to indicate that there were deaths here and that this is dangerous. And I don't mean one this big, I mean one 35 feet tall to indicate what's going on. So I have a whole bunch of ideas that might save deaths. And I don't know that anyone would work or not because we don't have a market, and I'm saying we should have a market. Okay, another objection I've already discussed. Would you have to pay every few feet, put in a penny every time you go 30 feet in front of someone's house? And my idea here is that if there's a road, you wouldn't, and here are the houses. It's not that you would divide the road in half, and each house owner would own a little bit of the road, and every time you go by, you'd have to pay a fee. Rather, there'd be one owner of the entire road, Magnolia Street or the 85, Highway 85, which runs past Auburn. And how would we privatize this? Well, we'd say all the people on the houses on the side of the road, let's say Magnolia Street has got, 1,000 people on both sides of the road. Well, you just make up a new corporation and give each one of them a share in the road, and now this trades on the stock market, and you would have one road owner of Magnolia Street, and they would decide maybe they would make it for free because most of the people that live on the side use it anyway, and maybe not. I mean, Walmart allows parking for free. So maybe it would be a lost leader in that sense because the people maybe the store owners want more traffic or what have you. Okay, another objection is privacy. Suppose you want to go see your proctologist and you don't want other people to know, or you want to have an affair, you want to engage in adultery or something, and you don't want your wife or your husband to know that you're going to see somebody, and if the road can keep track of where you're going, then your spouse will find out and everyone will know you're seeing a proctologist and this and that and the other. Well, we have all sorts of ways of getting around that. If people want privacy, they can pay for it. We have privacy, a whole industry that tries to get you privacy, and the main underminers of privacy are the government. So if government weren't involved and if government were less, we'd have less of a problem here. Another point is, let's take this house. Suppose you live in that house and the road owner says, yeah, I'll let you out on the road, but it'll cost $1 million every time you come out on the road. Namely, he's going to trap you in your house and you can't get in your house or out of your house. Well, right now, when you buy a house, you buy title insurance. What's title insurance? Title insurance is an insurance company certifies that, yes, the guy who's selling you the house really owns it, and if somebody else comes along and says, whoa, I'm the real owner of the house, the insurance company will pay you off. So you are assured by the insurance company that you have clear title to your house. Well, under a regime of private roads, you would have a thing called access insurance. Namely, before you buy this house, you would ask the road owner, hey, what's the deal? Will you let me out at a very cheap price or charge me no more than anyone else? And the road owner would have an incentive to be reasonable, because what the road owner wants is for people to have houses and factories and stores on his road. I mean, if it's a totally empty road that no one goes back and forth, why have the road? Unless you're in Alaska, you have the highway to nowhere or the bridge to nowhere, where the government made a road for 3 people and they spent millions of dollars on that. Well, you wouldn't have that. What you would have be an incentive for people to encourage people to locate on their road, and the way to encourage people to locate on the road is to obligate themselves to not charge an arm and a leg every time you get on and off the road. And anyway, they now call it freeways. It's because it's limited access. They really should call it taxways, because these roads are financed through taxes. And the idea here is that we would pay less in fees than we now pay in taxes. So don't think that if we privatize roads, you'd end up paying more. You might pay it explicitly, but implicitly you're not being taxed an arm and a leg for the public roads. Okay, another one is a natural monopoly, that roads are somehow a natural monopoly. In my lecture on antitrust, I try to deal with that. It's not based on the number of competitors, it's based on legal entry. Look, if there was this road over here, the last thing this road over here wants is for somebody else to build a road over there parallel to it and a mile away, because then they lose half their customers. So they have an incentive to be nice, even if they're the only one. Even if they're the only firm in the industry, they'd have an incentive to be rational, because the last thing they want to do is to be punitive and then discourage customers and then set up a profit opportunity for a competitor. The last thing they want is for somebody else to start thinking, hey, maybe we should build another road and avoid this road. They don't want that. One last thing, and that's eminent domain. Would we need eminent domain? This is a sticking point. People say, if you want to build a road from, I don't know, where are we? We're in Auburn now. And let's say we want to build a road to New Orleans, where I live. And there's the road. And I don't know how many people have property between here and New Orleans. It's, I don't know, about 300 miles away. There must be 3,000, 10,000, 30,000 people that have, an acre here or 2 acres there. And what we want to do is buy up land, maybe for 6 lanes with a little median, maybe 150 feet wide, 10 feet for a lane. That's 60 feet for the lanes going forward and back. So let's say we want 100 feet wide and 300 miles long. And let's say there are 30,000 people that have land that we want to go through, and we want to buy their land so we can put our road through. And now what you have is the holdout problem, which is supposedly the reason that you need eminent domain. Okay, so I have a whole chapter on this in the book, and I try to deal with the issue of, do we need government at least to have eminent domain? And eminent domain is theft. I mean, what the eminent domain means is the government comes in and seizes your house, whether you like it or not, and then pays you what it thinks your house is worth or your land is worth, which is theft, even if they pay you something for it. So there are various ways around it. First of all, you don't have to build the road straight as the crow flies, virtually straight. You could build it this way, you could build it that way, you could build it this way, you could build it that way. There are more than one way to skin a cat, if I can be permitted such a horrible aphorism. So here you are in Auburn, here you are in New Orleans, and there are A, B, C, D, E, F, G, 6 or 7 routes that you could take. So if you get a holdout over here, you just go to a different route. Or what you could do is buy options. What's an option? An option is you go to a farmer and say, hey, Farmer Jones, I want to buy your land, but I'm not sure I want to buy it. But I might want to buy it, and I'll tell you what, how much would you sell me your land for? And he says, $10,000 an acre. I say, okay, fine. I will buy your land at $10,000 an acre. All I need is a little thin strip, but I'll buy an acre or 2 from you. And but I'm not sure I want to buy it, so I'd like to buy an option. And instead of paying you $10,000 an acre to buy it, I'll pay you $1,000 to have an option to buy it at the agreed upon price of $10,000 an acre, as long as I exercise this option within 3 years or whatever the time period is. So you start buying options all over these things, and whenever you make a clean sweep of getting options, well, that's your road. Another possibility is you announce that you want to build a road from Auburn to New Orleans, and you tell people, here are the 6 or 7 routes that I might take, A through G, and you guys get together, and as soon as you guys, the first one to get everyone en route to agree, wins the prize, and I'll build your road there, and I'll pay twice as much or 3 times as much as it would be in farmland. But suppose you have a Cartman, from South Park, and you know what Cartman says? Screw you guys, screw you guys, screw you guys. That's his main contribution to civilization. Screw you guys. And suppose he doesn't just own this, but he owns a piece of land like that. He owns the land in that red area. And he says, screw you, I'm not letting you build it because, I'm just the, pain in the rear end, and I'm not letting you build it. And what happened on this one, this took me a year or two to really figure out how to do it. And I discussed this with my son, who was age 15 through 17 during the time we discussed this. And we finally came up with, well, you can build a tunnel under or a bridge over. Because we don't believe in the doctrine of ad coelum. The doctrine of ad coelum is that if you own a square mile of the earth, you own a decreasing cone down toward the center of the earth, and also an increasing cone upward, which would make airplane travel difficult. Why? Because we're libertarians and we believe in homesteading, and nobody homesteaded anything 300 feet below their surface of the land, and nobody homesteaded anything up in the air. The airplanes homesteaded that right, so they have a right to go there, and we have a right to go under. So slant drilling is okay. So if you have 2 pieces of land and somebody wants to drill down and then under his neighbor's land, he can if he's the first one there. But then the argument is, well, Cartman can start putting sticks down below him and putting fences up so we can't build a bridge and we can't build a tunnel. And the key here is to understand, now you have to understand American football. And in football, here are the goal lines, and here's the 50-yard line, and here is the end zone. And if you're over here going this way, it's sort of easy to move the ball because you have the whole field with which to move it. But when you get over here and you're trying to get past the goal line, it's very hard to do because you have only this area to work with. Everyone with me on this football business? Well, it's the same thing here. Remember, Cartman has got to defend, I don't know how long that is, call it 20 miles. He's got to defend a goal line of 20 miles, and all we have to do is get the football through him, and the football is how big? 100 feet wide. So let him put all the sticks he wants. He's got to do it for 15 or 20 miles wide, and all we have to do is 1, and we go under his sticks. So this, I think, would obviate that threat. Okay, so I'm now finished with roads. I think that, to just summarize this, we need private roads to save lives and to deal with traffic congestion. And I have many, many more objections that I deal with in the book. So if you're interested, I think the book is free for electronics, so you don't have to buy it. You can just access it, although they are selling it here. Okay, the next thing I want to get into is oceans, rivers, and lakes. And I tell you, oceans, rivers, and lakes are more daunting than roads. Why is it more daunting? Because of the water cycle. Right now, the water is in the ocean, and it evaporates up into the clouds, and then it rains over the mountains, and then it gets into a stream, and the stream gets into a lake, and then the lake gets into a river, the Mississippi River, and then it gets out into the Gulf of Mexico. So it's sort of a cycle. And, if you're going to have ownership, first of all, you have to have scarcity to have ownership. And a lot of the ocean is not yet scarce, although it's getting scarce. Scarce means that we have rivalrousness. Namely, if somebody is using it, somebody else gets less use out of it because there's crowding. Well, the Mississippi River is already pretty scarce. There are a lot of boats there, and there'd be more boats if people were allowed to be on that river. There are lakes that are scarce. I want to read something to you from the Globe and Mail, a Canadian newspaper, which is sort of like the New York Times, sort of a pinko newspaper. And they're talking about in British Columbia, Howe Sound has no place for an LNG, liquefied natural gas plant. And what it says is Wood Fiber LNG Limited has proposed the construction of a liquefied natural gas facility at the head of Howe Sound, which is a body of water, a scenic fjord beloved by British Columbians, especially those in the Lower Mainland. Opposition to the project to date has largely focused on whether the province should return industry to a waterway that has only recently and at great expense been cleaned up. Having finally staunched the flow of heavy metals from the Britannia copper mine, do we really want to allow LNG tanker traffic in a fjord being repopulated with herring, salmon, orcas, and humpback whales? Every municipality on the Howe Sound has passed a resolution opposing this proposal. The project is under review by the BC, British Columbia Environmental Assessment Office, whose formal mandate is to give, quote, a full and fair consideration of all interests. A full and fair consideration of all interests with no prices, because there's no bidding, is very much like central planning. Well, not very much like central planning. It is central planning. And as Austrians, we know that socialism and central planning is irrational because you don't have prices of raw materials. So here you have this board, the BC Environmental Assessment Office, that is going to determine, based on whatever criteria, probably bribes or who knows, maybe ideology, as to whether you should allow it. You see, the point is, the Howe Sound can be used for swimming, boating, fishing, tankers, all sorts of things. And ordinarily, look, this red dye that I've got in my tie could be used for all sorts of things. Ties, or, I don't know, Coca-Cola bottles use red dye, and tires maybe use red dye. I mean, red dye can be used in shirts and shoes and all sorts of things. And how do we determine where the red dye is used? By bidding. Various people bid for red dye, and we have a rational allocation of red dye or cloth or metal or plastic or wood or labor or anything. We have a rational economy. But when we have oceans that are non-owned, or bodies of water that are non-owned, and there's a dispute as to who should use it, well, you're at sea without a rudder. It's very similar to what's happening with the bicycle lanes. How much of the road should be used for bicycle lanes? We don't know. If there were private people, the owner of the road would say, well, how much money can I make off the bicycle people? How much can I make off the car people? And then they would allocate the space for bicycle lanes versus cars in some sort of economical way. But without prices, you can't do it. And so what you have is a vast tragedy of the commons. So let me talk a little bit about what a tragedy of the commons is. And before I do, there's this woman, Elinor Ostrom, who just won the Nobel Prize, I think, a year ago. And her shtick is the tragedy of the commons is irrational. She rejects the idea of tragedy of the commons, and I've got 2 or 3 articles out attacking her for this. So what is the tragedy of the commons? The tragedy of the commons is that if something is owned in common, we will overuse it because it costs us nothing to do. Now, I want to illustrate this with the buffalo. Here's a buffalo. And I'm going to make him look sad because he almost went extinct. And here's a cow. I'm going to make the cow look happy because the cow never went within 1,000,000 miles of extinction. Aren't those pretty... no applause for my... Okay. Thank you. Okay, I take great pride in my artistic abilities. The reason the cow is happy is because he never went within 1,000,000 miles of being extinct, because the cow is always owned privately. The buffalo, for a long time, there was this movie, Dances with Wolves. Did anyone see that movie? It was a pretty good movie if you leave your brain at the outside because it's a Pinko movie, and they say the reason the buffalo went extinct is the white man or something like that, whereas the Indians would never kill buffalo in masses, but which they did. The idea is if you kill a cow today, what is the cost to you of killing a cow today, a cow tomorrow? If you kill your cow today, you don't have your cow tomorrow. If you hadn't killed the cow today, you would have had a cow tomorrow. So that's a pretty high cost. If you kill a buffalo today, what's the cost? Is it a buffalo tomorrow? No, the buffalo are running around like wild men, and you wouldn't have had the buffalo anyway, so you might as well kill the cow, kill the buffalo, even if you only want to have, use its tongue or use its liver or whatever. So there was a mass killing of buffalo, and it's only more recently when people were allowed to own buffalo that buffalo was saved. And as far as I'm concerned, elephants are just big buffalo with funny-looking noses, and same with rhinos and all those other extinct species or endangered species in Africa. If you want to save them, you have to privatize them, and then people will take care of them because they'll own them, and we have private property in them. Okay, so what's happening with the oceans? It's a vast tragedy of the commons, and that's why you get this sort of thing that I was talking about before, where the water is 75% of the Earth's surface, and it accounts for 1% of the GDP, whereas the land is 25% of the surface, and it accounts for virtually 99% of the GDP. So one reason for privatizing the oceans is to get rid of the tragedy of the commons. Another reason is, say, the drought, the water shortage. In California, the way they're running the water situation is that it costs farmers $5 an acre foot. An acre foot is an acre wide and a foot deep of water. It's several millions of gallons. Whereas in the city, they charge, something like $700 an acre foot. And there's no trade. There's no, because the farmers don't really own it. They just get to use it. So if we had privatization of water, there'd be no more droughts. Look, the reason we have starvation in Africa is if you have bad crops in one country and good crops in the other country, they don't allow markets to bring the crops from the good country to the bad country, because this would be gouging and all sorts. We can't allow free trade. Well, it's the same thing. Whereas if Iowa has a good crop and Kansas has a lousy crop, there's no crisis. We have an internal free trade zone of the United States, so you never have any problems like that. Well, it's the same thing with water. If you have a drought in the U.S. and Canada is up to its armpits in water, and we had privatized water, well, then there'd be shipments of water from Canada to California, and there'd be no problem. But we are in the U.S. with regard to water as they are in Africa with regard to food. So that's another reason for privatizing the oceans, rivers, and lakes. Let's take another example. Take the case of Katrina. Now, I live in New Orleans. The storm Katrina, well, first of all, if we really had private enterprise, we wouldn't have any storms. The bad weather is all due to the government's fault. I'm serious about this, because they take half the GDP and just waste it. And not only do they waste it, but they use that money to make the rest of the economy less efficient. So imagine a case where they didn't take half the GDP and use a lot of that to make the rest of the economy less efficient, and we were twice or three times as rich as we are now. Surely, well, maybe not for sure, but almost for sure, we would have made more inroads in weather control. Seeding the clouds would have been a private enterprise, and it would have rained when we wanted to rain. In New Orleans, they're always having parades, and half the time they're getting rained out. Well, we'd make sure that the rain only occurred, say, from 2 to 4 in the morning or something. I mean, we should run the weather. The weather shouldn't run us. So the storms probably wouldn't occur anyway. And it's not due to global warming. It's due to the government. Everything bad is due to the government. Bad breath, everything is the government's fault. Katrina missed New Orleans. It went about 40 miles east. It really got Mississippi. Why then were 1,900 people killed? And you think that this is sort of puzzling because with a tornado, you get about 2-minute warning. But with a storm like Katrina, they had a week or 2 weeks. And on TV, they'd say, well, here's where the storm is, and it's going at 15 miles an hour, and it's going to get here on Thursday at between 2 and 3 in the afternoon or something like that. So people had notice, but somehow, people died anyway. But the real cause of the tragedy was the Army Corps of Engineers. The what do you call it? Sorry, not FEMA. The levees. The levees broke. They say, what is it? Make love, not levees, or make levees, not war. I forget what the saying was. The levees broke. FEMA came in afterward, which is a whole other issue, which I'll get to in a second. But the levees broke. Now, look, as an economist, I don't mind that the levees broke. Because even if they were private, you're going to have some accidents. Private doesn't mean perfection. There's profit and loss in the private economy. So there will be mistakes made. And sometimes, even if we had the Mississippi River Corporation running the levees, sometimes the levee would break. What really rankles me as an economist is that those guys are still in charge of the Mississippi River. You see, if a private company failed dismally, look, if McDonald's started poisoning people, that would be it for McDonald's. We'd go to Burger King or Wendy's or something. That's why we have pretty good stuff. Because whenever somebody makes a big mistake, they go broke. Where is Packard anymore? Where is Pan Am? Where are all these other companies? They're not extinct, but they're bankrupt, and the companies that took their place presumably have an advantage. The thing that rankles the economist in me is that the Army Corps of Engineers can't go broke any more than the post office can go broke. So if we had privatization of the river and somebody did a very bad job, there'd be heads lopped off, figuratively, not literally, but we'd have a new company running it. So this would be another reason for privatizing bodies of water. Another motto of mine is that land is slow-moving water. Water is fast-moving land. Because land moves too. You have mudslides. And sometimes water is very stable when it's in an iceberg. Doesn't move at all. So my idea here, and all through the book, I have a co-author on this book, and our view was that we're trying to say that land and water are not that different. And if we want to privatize land, then we ought to want to privatize water. I've only got a few more minutes, so let me talk about privatizing space. The book on oceans, rivers, and lakes, I wish I could have included this stuff in that book, but we just gave it to the publishers, and they said no more changes. So I'll have to use this for something else. But now on to the space. We want to privatize the moon. We want to privatize Mars, privatize asteroids, privatize the job of keeping asteroids off of us. The asteroids supposedly got the dinosaurs. We don't want them to get us. And right now it's governments that's going to stop the asteroids from getting us. And if a big asteroid hit us, we'd be in trouble. So all these things, I think, have to be privatized. And I gave you the general case for privatization. So let me now talk about why we should privatize Mars and the moon and maybe Venus or what have you. The main reason... I'm a humanist. I make no apologies. Pretty soon this will be, I'll have to give a trigger warning because it's demeans our animal friends or something like that. I don't know. This will be microaggression, but I'm a humanist. I like human beings. I want human beings to prosper and, live long and prosper, as they say in that TV show. I'm pro-human. Sue me. And I notice that humans are pretty vicious animals. They kill each other like flies. The reason I supported my man Barack Obama against McCain in 2008 is I thought McCain was really going to drop a nuclear bomb on somebody. I thought he was that rabid. Not that I'm a big fan of Obama. I mean, Lord knows. But I think Obama is less likely to drop a bomb and more likely to be peaceful. And I think foreign policy is very important. So why do I want private people to be on the moon and Mars? Because if we all blow each other up on this Earth, and we have a colony on the moon and a colony on Mars, at least some human beings will live. It's a sobering thought that some maniacs, can have. I mean, look at what the U.S. is doing now with Russia. They're saying they shouldn't mess with the Crimea. What the hell business is of the U.S. with Crimea? I love Putin, who's saying, well, Texas ought to secede. He's likening Crimea to Texas. Look, the warmonger, the neocons, they're itching for a war with the Soviet Union. Or rather with Russia now. And Russia's got nukes, and we've got, the U.S. government has got nukes, and, they could really blow up the whole world. Hopefully they won't do it right away, and we'll get some colonies on Mars and the moon, so at least some human beings will live, and I'm pro-human. So that's the main reason, that, other than the other reasons that I gave for privatizing anything. That's the main focus that I want to put forth for your consideration for having privatization on the Mars and Moon. And maybe if a private company could put an atmosphere in Mars, they're more likely to do it than the government. And right now, there's only one flag on the moon, and that's a U.S. government flag. I'd like to see private companies doing that. A minor reason for privatizing bodies of heavenly bodies is just the economics. Maybe the green cheese on the moon will have specialization and division of labor, and we can have trade between the moon. A very good book is by Heinlein, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. Did anyone ever read that? Very good book where they talk about a colony on the moon. My time is up. Thanks for your attention.